Well, Meredith said that she actually wanted me to talk a little bit about it. I don't want to take up a lot of time because I think we really need to network tonight. Y'all don't need to spend a lot of time listening to me. What Meredith asked me to talk about is sort of if I could highlight the biggest challenges facing women and women's rights supporters at the national level. Maybe, well, it's really on two levels. It's our fundamental right to reproductive health on the one hand, and it's women's economic security is at risk.
Correct.
And those are the two things that are just amazing. Right now, John Boehner, the new Speaker of the House, who repeatedly said that he wanted to focus like a laser. In fact, just recently, one of his spokespeople was saying he wants to focus like a laser on jobs and the economy. Right. Nonetheless, names H.R. 3. This is a bill that was dropped by Chris Smith of New Jersey. And Mr. Boehner, the Speaker of the House, made this H.R. 3. That's the third bill that the Speaker acknowledged and accepted as proposed legislation. And what is H.R. 3? It's also known as the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortions Act. That is a deceptive label to put on it because it's not actually just about federal funding for abortions. It is about private insurance funding for abortions. What the law does is it carves in stone the Hyde Amendment, which cuts off federal funding for abortions for women who need that. Under the Hyde Amendment, the exceptions are in cases of rape and incest and where the life of the pregnant woman is at stake. But note that even the Hyde Amendment does not provide an exception in the cases where a woman's health is at stake. And I want us to pause for a moment and think what that means. Suppose a woman has breast cancer, right, or kidney disease, or diabetes, and she becomes pregnant unintentionally. And her team of doctors say you need to terminate that pregnancy. That termination costs upward of $5,000. Because your entire oncology team or your entire heart disease specialty team, whatever it is, needs to be involved. You need to be in the hospital, you need to be observed, etc., right? Private insurance exists to cover exactly that sort of health emergency for families. And under H.R. 3, private insurance will not be available for women who need to terminate pregnancies if the pregnancy merely makes them sicker. It's only when the pregnancy brings them to death's door that you get some kind of an exception. So basically, H.R. 3 is the kind of bill that in order to love that bill, okay, you must hate women. There's no other way to think about it. If you hate women, you'll love that bill. Otherwise, you really don't want to be on that bill. Right? And unfortunately, there are some extremely extremists, some huge extremists in the House of Representatives right now that are pushing that sort of thing. The only exceptions under H.R. 3 for how women could get funding to terminate their pregnancies would be not in cases of rape, but in cases of forcible rape.
Are you kidding me?
Right. So now we're back to the 1950s, where it has taken us, it took the women's movement decades and decades and decades to finally get people to understand that if she says no, it's rape. Right? And this business of you can get the exception only for forcible rape takes us right back to the 30s and 40s and 50s, where you have to show the bruises and the broken bones.
Wow.
In the goodness of their hearts, these fundamentalist, very extreme legislators took the word forcible out. But what they did in the process was to make an issue of really what counts as rape. Right? And they are clearly moving in the direction, they're not accepting that if she says no, it's rape. So that's an issue. Incest. Incest is an exception? Well, no, not under H.R. 3. No, only incest involving a minor.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I am not kidding you. Now, I have a 20-year-old daughter. Okay, she has a lot of friends. I knew these kids. I knew her friends in junior high school and in high school, and I know her friends in college. And the reality is that young women are vulnerable, can be highly vulnerable. But under H.R. 3, There is no exception when the pregnancy results from incest if the pregnant woman is over the age of 18. What else? HR 3 also, there's a different bill, not HR 3. So that's the no taxpayer funding for abortion law. Then there's Joe Pitts of the infamous Stupak-Pitts Amendment. He's got a separate bill in the House of Representatives that would bring back the Stupak-Pitts Amendment, right? Would amend the Affordable Care Act to make it impossible for private insurance companies over a period of time. Actually, HR 3 is really like Stupak on steroids because it immediately makes it impossible to get private insurance coverage for abortion care. The Stupak-Pitts Amendment, which has been reintroduced, would eventually choke off funding from private insurance companies over maybe a period of 4 or 5 years. So that's kind of the difference between them. And the third, incredibly, actually there are now 4. So the fourth one came up in the past 3 days. The third anti-reproductive rights bill that's floating around there is this conscience, the so-called conscience clause. And of course, as we now know from the Supreme Court, corporations are persons entitled to First Amendment protections. And if I could just digress, y'all remember when Justice Scalia was quoted recently talking about how the 14th Amendment, women's equality is not in the Constitution?
Right.
You know what Scalia didn't say, and let me just quote the 14th Amendment, quote, "Nor shall any person be deprived of the equal protection of the laws." Period. Nor shall any person be deprived of, so